Hello students, welcome to the session of business laws for BBA 5th semester students. So in our previous session we had discussed about the syllabus in detail, and as I had mentioned, the most important act you are going to study in business laws is the Indian Contract Act of 1872. Out of your 5 modules, the first 3 modules are mainly connected with the Indian Contract Act of 1872. So what you are going to study in module 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, here like this we have already discussed it. So in module 1, the first topic is relating to the meaning and definition of a contract. So what do you mean by a contract? Because the act is named as the Indian Contract Act. So first we have to understand that what is the term contract. So the first thing you are going to study is about here what is a contract. Then we are going to study here what are the essentials of valid contract. So that is the second part. What do you mean by essentials of a valid contract? And then we are going to study about the kinds of contract and other aspects which I have mentioned in the syllabus. So now here in this session we will try to understand what is the definition of the word contract, how it is defined in the act. So please remember students, it is a pre-independent act 1872. The act was brought into force in 1872 during the British rule, and this has been continued even till today with some amendments. There are certain amendments here for this act, and it has been continued. And the act is almost what I told you here, the same that it prevailed here in the 19th century. And the terminologies used. So here the thing is that you have to understand about here the meaning of these through the definitions given in that act. So the first, as the title of the act is Indian Contract Act, we should try to know the definition of the contract. But before that, so just if I ask a layman, what do you mean by the term contract? So if I ask any person who doesn't know anything about here the law, or a layman, a common person, if I ask him what do you mean by a contract, the answer he gives is that it is an agreement. It is an agreement to do something or not to do something. So he uses this word here, the agreement. It is an agreement here between two persons. So this is the common answer where what we can get. But exactly that is the meaning of the contract, or is there any other meaning given in the act, that we have to know it. So that is why here we are going to study here the definition of the contract. So the Indian Contract Act 1872 section 2 here clause H. So this should be read as clause H. Section 2 clause H defines the term contract as an agreement enforceable by law. An agreement enforceable by law. It is an agreement enforceable by law. This is what we have got the definition of a contract in section 2H. So a very short definition is there, but you have to understand, you should analyze the definition, and you have to get here the meaning of that contract by going into the depth. So you should go into the depth of this definition and try to know what you mean by this here, the word contract. So if I say an agreement enforceable by law, here is a contract. So you will be not getting the full meaning of the contract. What does this mean? You have to go in depth here. So broadly you can analyze this. Here the definition in two parts. It is an agreement. This is the first part you can take. Second part is enforceable by law. So by here dividing the definition in two parts, we will try to understand the meaning of the contract. So this is the first part. What is an agreement? So it is an agreement. It is here mainly commonly every person says that it is an agreement. This is the first part. Second part is enforceable by law. We will try to understand. Here, what does the term, mainly the agreement, mean? What is the meaning of the agreement? So each and every term are mainly defined in this act. So here when you are reading mainly section 2, H, clause H. So along with that, you have to read two more clauses. That is here mainly section 2. You have to read section 2E. So this is here to be here along with the section 2 clause H. You have to here mainly to be read with the section 2 clause E and section 2 clause here B. So if you club all these, you will get the meaning of the agreement. So to understand what is a contract, you should first here mainly the definition is given, an agreement enforceable by law. So then in section 2 clause E, here the word agreement is defined. So agreement is defined in section 2 here clause E. So what do you mean by an agreement? Agreement is nothing but it is a promise or set of promises forming consideration to each other. This is the definition. A promise or set of promises forming consideration to each other. Now I will be more clear to you students, because always the law has to be understood with the help of the examples. So that will help you to understand the meaning, the law or mainly the ingredient. So that here what you mean by agreement? So it is a promise. Promise here mainly here or set of promises. It may be one promise or it may be many promises forming consideration to each other. So like what we give an example. Take hypothetical example I will take. Here A promises to sell his here mainly the bike to B for mainly here 10,000 rupees. For 10,000 rupees. A promises to sell his bike to B for 10,000 rupees. So this is just I am giving you an example. A mainly has made a promise to be that he will sell his bike here for 10,000 rupees. So it is a promise, or it may be more than one promise also. That's why the word in agreement here mainly we are using a set of promises. Promise or set of promises. So this is a promise made by here A to B that he is going to sell his bike, and B has accepted that promise, and he has also promised in return that he will pay that price of 10,000. So forming consideration to each other, the promise made by A here and promise made by B, both are forming consideration to each other. Consideration means something in return they are getting. So A is selling his bike and in return he will be getting 10,000. B is giving 10,000 rupees and in return he will be getting the bike. So a set of promise or set of promise forming consideration to each other is a agreement. That is what the word agreement means. This is how you have to mainly try to understand. It is an agreement. So here this agreement, a promise. Then what do you mean by a promise? The word promise is mainly defined in section 2 clause B. Section 2 here clause B gives the definition of the promise. So what is a promise? Usually, as you know, that a contract is made of two parties, where one party here proposes to do something to another with the intention of getting the consent of that person here for the act. So take this as same example, you will understand. A has made a proposal to B. Proposal is also called as offer. Here A here has made a proposal to B to sell his bike for 10,000 rupees. Here this is a proposal. So I am explaining you the point. What you mean by a promise? In a contract usually there will be two parties, where one party here makes a proposal or an offer to another. So here A is making a proposal to another, means to B. Why he is making? To get the consent of the B whether he is ready to purchase that bike for 10,000 rupees. And if B agrees to purchase, so if he agrees to purchase and gives his consent that he is ready to purchase, so we say that the proposal of A is accepted by B, and accepted proposal is called as a promise. Accepted proposal. The word you can see, there will be first proposal, and accepted proposal means the acceptance must come from this person, B. So accepted proposal here is a promise. So here maybe when you try to understand what is a contract, so try to be very here clear with this, because this is the basic question, the definition of the contract. So three sections, mainly you are going the section 2 is common, where we are going to study clause H, which defines the contract, clause E, which defines the agreement, and clause B of section 2 here mainly defines the promise. So in a contract there one person promises to do something here, that is right, and B has accepted proposal here becomes the promise, and the person making here the proposal is called as promisor, and to whom it is made he is called as promisee. Promisor and promisee. So two parties. So like this here, this is how mainly an agreement. So agreement involves all these things. The agreement involves here these things. So immediately only saying that a contract here is an agreement enforceable by law, we cannot here mainly understand the meaning. Agreement enforceable by law, if we mean this, you cannot understand the meaning of the contract. You have to go into the detail of the terminology used, agreement, which is defined in section 2 clause E. And again, agreement means a promise. So agreement means a promise. Then what is a promise, which is defined in section 2 clause B? So that helps you to get the meaning. So that is here the meaning, what you have to know, that is an agreement. So these are the things here mainly to be understood. And the second part is that agreement must be enforceable by law. The agreement what is made must be enforceable by law. See, that's very important. Why here is that word used, enforceable by law? It should be permitted by law. It should not be forbidden by law. It should not be against the law. The agreement which you are entering, the subject matter must not be against the law. It should not be forbidden by the law. So the law should not have forbidden it. That's why when framing the definition, the jurists are very careful to use the terminologies. They have used very accurately the terminologies. Enforceable by law, permitted by law. They will be permitted by law, that is acceptable by the law. So such mainly here agreements can be called as contract. If it is permitted, the subject matter is permitted by the law, then we call it as here a contract. Otherwise no. For example, here P here agrees to give. He makes a contract with here Q, saying that he will give 10 lakhs of rupees to Q if Q mainly shoots here X. If Q shoots X. So P has made this and Q has accepted it, and he mainly shoots mainly X. Now later here P refuses to give that amount of 10 lakhs. Can here Q go to the court of law and enforce it in the law? That P had promised me to pay 10 lakhs if I kill here X. Can he file a case against P? The answer is no. Why? Because killing another person, hurting another person is not permissible in the law. It is forbidden by the law. Here the law will not permit such agreement. It is unenforceable in the law. You cannot enforce it in the law. So that's why here this agreement must be enforceable by law. It must be enforceable by law. Then only such agreements are called as contracts. Otherwise we cannot call it as a contract. So that is what you have to remember. Here an agreement enforceable by law. Even sometimes if you see, many of the here agreements may not be contracts. If they are of social nature, if they are of a domestic nature, if they are of social nature or the domestic nature, then the here mainly agreement is not enforceable in the law. For example, here just one example I will be taking. Here Y invites his friend Z for a dinner at a restaurant. Z accepts it, and mainly he here says that he will join Y at the restaurant at the scheduled time. Y goes to the restaurant, but he does not find that mainly Z turning up. So he has agreed, Z had agreed that he will join that, but he did not turn up here mainly for the dinner then. So can mainly Y go to the court of law and here file a suit against Z for not keeping up his promise? He had promised it, but he has not kept up his promise. He has broken his promise. Can Y go to the court of law and here mainly against Z for breaking the promise? Answer is again no, because these are all social agreements. Social agreement is not enforceable in the law. Social agreement is not permissible in the law. Domestic agreements are also not here they permissible in the law. They are not, because domestic agreements here the parties do not have the intention of entering into a legal relationship, legal obligation. So as that is lacking here, mainly it is not enforceable in the court of law. For this you have got one, I will be speaking about a decided case. So usually in your examination, when in my first period I have mentioned to you the last part, section D, which is carrying 15 marks, where you have to answer 3 questions. Here mainly out of 5 questions you have to answer 3 questions which carries 15 marks, means each question is carrying 5 marks there. It is a caselet. And this time you are going to study around about, as I told you, here 10 to 15 important cases. So on which you can expect the questions in the last part. So here I will be taking Balfour versus Balfour. This is the case. Balfour versus Balfour case. A decided case. It is a decided case. Here and now you have to here mainly think of whether this, mainly in this case, the agreement was permissible in the law or not. That is what we will discuss here, mainly Balfour versus Balfour case. This is one of the very here prominent case. Here when giving the here mainly example for the contract, here mainly we discuss this. So Mr. and Mrs. Balfour were residing at Sri Lanka. They were residing at Sri Lanka, and Mr. Balfour got a job here in England. So he had to leave his mainly wife, Mrs. Balfour, back in Sri Lanka and go to join here his work at London. And he promised here to send Here mainly amount for his wife, here mainly for her use. So from London he agreed that he would send certain amount to here Mrs. Balfour. Here promising this to his wife, he goes to here mainly London. After going to here London, he mainly never sends the money. And Mrs. Balfour files a case against her husband to mainly claim the amount that he has not kept up his promise. Now, whether such an agreement are enforceable in the court of law, whether such a case are enforceable. Just I gave you the facts of the case. Mr. and Mrs. Balfour are staying in Sri Lanka. Mr. Balfour promising her, mainly wife of Mrs. Balfour, to send here a fixed money every month from England. He goes to England for the job. But later he never sends the money. And what we find is Mrs. Balfour files a case for the claim. Whether Mrs. Balfour will succeed or not. This is the mainly such caselets will come in your examination. Now you have to decide whether it is permissible in the court or not. Just apply your mind here and think over the matter. So what answer we will be getting is that Mrs. Balfour cannot go to the court of law, or this agreement is not enforceable in the court of law. Hence we cannot call it as a contract. So we cannot, it is a domestic agreement between the husband and the wife there. So that is not here permissible in the court of law. The law doesn't have the jurisdiction to deal with such agreements. It is not enforceable in the court of law. Now, but just to make the point more clear, if mainly I change the facts, you can understand it more. You can understand this thing here better. Now, if Mr. and Mrs. Balfour are separated and there is a divorce between them, and by the court there is an order that Mr. Balfour has to pay this certain amount to Mrs. Balfour for maintenance. Here, if this was the case, and if Mr. Balfour had failed to pay that amount as a maintenance to Mrs. Balfour would have succeeded there. So it is a case because both the parties had intended to enter into a legal binding relationship. They are ready to undergo the legal obligation, and based on that they had applied for the separation and the divorce. And the maintenance claim was there. And the court had accepted it and had ordered it. So in this case, it is enforceable. If Mr. Balfour had failed in this circumstance, he would have been here mainly the defaulter. And here the court, the Mrs. Balfour would have succeeded. But now it is an agreement between a husband and a wife. It is a domestic agreement. Here not having the jurisdiction in the law. Hence it is not enforceable in the court of law. Like this is the very famous case we have got, the Balfour versus Balfour. So such questions later on also we will be discussing many such decided cases. So whenever in your examination I am telling you, wherever possible, give the examples. In my previous semester also I have told you, give the examples. Try to quote the decided cases. If you remember it. If you remember it, try to quote the decided cases. Now, sometimes directly they have asked a question. Directly the question is there. Here, the mainly question related to here the Balfour and Balfour case. So in the caselet they have given the caselet, just they have changed the names there and asked you to decide. So you can just mainly mention that here such a case had arisen, here such a situation had arisen in the Balfour versus Balfour, and the court has decided in this way that as it is a domestic agreement, it is not permissible in the court of law, it is not enforceable in the court of law. Here hence Mrs. Balfour will not succeed. So like this, they may change the names and give you. Just to remember this one case related here first, Balfour versus Balfour. This is an important case here. So social agreements are not enforceable in the court of law. Religious agreements are not enforceable in the court of law. Domestic agreements are not enforceable in the court of law. So then how you can mainly determine that here they are enforceable. You have to see the intention of the parties. Where the parties have intended to here fulfill the legal obligations. So that if it is here criteria is noticed, then you can say it is enforceable in the court of law. That is what you have to make yourself that clear. So while understanding the definition of the contract, try to be very clear. Two parts I have divided it and I have analyzed it. An agreement here enforceable by law. So what is agreement we have decided, and what is mainly enforceable by law. So in the same way I gave you the example. If the subject matter of the contract is forbidden by the law also, it is not enforceable. The example I gave you where one person agrees to kill another person, here this is not permissible in the court of law. So such examples you have to remember, quote these examples. So if it is mainly an agreement here to do a forbidden act by the law. If the parties have intended to do such an act which is forbidden by the law, then here mainly any default there or any violation or breaking of the agreement is there, then neither of the parties can go to the court of law, because the subject matter is itself here unlawful. So it is not permissible. So that is why the jurists are very clear on this aspect. The jurists are very clear. They have said that here the agreement must be enforceable by law. Then only you can call such agreement as contracts. So there is a statement. There is a statement. Here mainly agreements are not contract. There is a statement, all agreements cannot become a contract. So remember this. You cannot say that each and every agreement leads to the contract. You have to see the genuinity of the agreement. You have to see the genuinity of the agreement. That is, whether it is genuinity means that whether it is enforceable by the law or not, you have to see it. If it is enforceable, then we can call it. So that is why all agreements we cannot call it as a contract. But on the contrary, if you call the word used as a contract, the contract are all agreements. It is an agreement. It is an agreement, but all contracts here all agreements cannot be called as a contract. All agreements, that's what I mentioned you. If it is a forbidden act, if it is a social agreement, if it is a domestic agreement, those cannot be entertained in the law. So they are not enforceable, they are unenforceable. So like this, here mainly this, you should understand this, the term contract. So wherever is possible, try to give the examples. Try to give the examples. So here, from your examination point of view, sometimes in first part, as I told you, you may have 2 marks questions. Like what is a contract? They may ask you, or define a contract. You must be able to write it. So do not stop. Here suppose if the question is there, define a contract, it's a 2 marks question. I told you 4 to 5 sentences you have to write. Say that mainly an agreement enforceable by law is a contract. So agreement is a promise here between 2 persons. Here it is a promise between 2 persons. What is a promise? Where one person has made, because a contract has 2 parties, where one person has made the promise to do something, an offer to do something, and other party has accepted. So accepted proposal leads to the promise. So this is how you have to mainly give that information, the definition. So try to analyze it. Do not stop only giving that a contract means it is an agreement enforceable by law. So we cannot give you full marks here. We may cut the marks and give you only 1 marks. And if possible, you try to give one example, very short example. I told you this example. A wanted to sell his bike for 10,000 rupees to B. B agrees to purchase it here for 10,000. So there is mainly the promise is there, and the promise is accepted, and the accepted proposal here leading to the promise, and it is an agreement. it is enforceable. So like this you can give an example. So try to give the examples here. So you may get a what define contract, what is a contract, or they may ask you directly what is meant by an agreement, what does the term here agreement means. Also here they may ask you what is defined promise. So along with this section 2 clause H, you have to read section 2 clause E, section 2 clause B. So three terminologies are very important: contract, agreement, promise. And these questions you can get for 2 marks. 2 marks question these are. And also try to remember this case, Balfour versus Balfour. Social agreements, domestic agreements are not enforceable in the court of law. That is what we have got, mainly a decided case. So this is the first part, what we call it as the definition and the meaning of the contract. So immediately we cannot jump by giving only the definition. So when we analyze it, we get the meaning of the term contract. So when we understand this word contract, then we can move with the next part. So the next part is here the essentials of the valid contract. So why that word valid is used? Because those contracts are enforceable in the court of law. They are called as valid contracts. So when does a contract become a valid contract? So valid contract, you have to think in the term of that it is enforceable in the court of law. It is permissible in the court of law. So a contract must have certain ingredients, or they are called as the elements, essentials. So this is the next question which we are going to discuss. So this question is for your 10 marks. It is a essay type question. Define contract and state the essentials of valid contract. This is the question. Essentials of the valid here mainly contract. So you have got 2 questions merged here. It is for 10 marks, 3 plus 7. 3 marks is for the definition and 7 marks is what you give the essentials. So there are certain here essentials of a valid contract which are mentioned in this act, here Indian Contract Act. So we are going to study each and every essentials with examples. So once you know these essentials, that here you are mainly preparing for 1 10 marks question which is usually asked in the examination, essentials of the valid contract. So in my next class, I will be discussing on the essentials of the valid contract. So we'll continue with students. Thank you.